Hello, hello, and welcome everyone to Triumph Discovery Moments with me. As you'll notice today in this special episode, we do not have the lovely Queen Isabel David as your host and the interviewer of everything, but her spirit is with us. She's actually in Los Angeles still, taking care of some really important things for our family and taking care of her mother and some other really good things for our tribe and our community. So if you are part of the community in Los Angeles, you know what? Why don't you go to Instagram? I'm totally going to blow up my wife's spot right now. Go over to Isabel B. David, Isabel B. That's for her middle name, David, on Instagram. DM her, tell her I'm part of the Triumph community. Saw on YouTube, Jason wanted us to blow up your Instagram and let you know that we want to connect with you. Who knows what could happen? She'll be in the South LA area, LA, Torrance, all those areas. So all the way down to Laguna potentially. So make sure you reach out to her if you want to hear more from her. Make sure that I want to make sure you realize we are here as the founders of Triumph Global, which is a global, Christocentric, Christ-centered, Christ-informed community, void and detoxing. I like to say I am a detox machine in a toxic world. I am a detox machine in a toxic world. So I want you to know this realm called Triumph is about you getting free and you knowing all that belongs to you for you to come into alignment with your original design, the blueprint of your original Genesis, and your restored innocence and maintained innocence in God, in the Spirit. So Discovery Moments is about me, making myself available to your questions, the questions in the community. How do we get those questions? Is the community goes to Facebook, Triumph Global Now. There's a button on the top that says WhatsApp. Just click that button, type it in, send your message, or if you want, you could just drop it on the page. But if usually it might have to do with a sermon, a message, something that came up, you were reading the Bible, you were meditating, you were praying, your life with God, your life in the Spirit, the lessons and pains that you've gone through in life may have informed or arisen a question, which is very, very powerful thing. So if something comes up that way, or you have a realization, maybe your child asked you a question, you need some backup, make sure to go there and submit your question. And what we'll do is we'll vet it. We'll see what we want to do with that question. Isabel will ask the question to me at some point. She'll say, hey, this is on the roster. And also you may be invited on to do an interview yourself so that you can interview me live. We'll introduce you here and introduce you to the community, which is what we're going to be doing tonight. And this is going to be just a great quick show for you guys, Discovery Moment. And let's see what else. Oh, we have Discovery Moment Kids. So if you have kids and you're part of the community, we wanted to make ourselves available. Jesus was so available to his audience's questions, speaking publicly. You can go to any church in the world right now, any service, any denomination, and it's almost guaranteed that you will not be able to like raise your hand and ask a question while the pastor's preaching. So we thought, how do we come into better alignment with the opportunity for growth and evolution and mentorship and discipleship and whatever you want to call it, transference, impartation, activation, catalyst. How do we do that? He said, you know what? We need to allow people to ask questions. The best mentees are the people that ask the best questions. So just ask the questions. The disciples ask the Christ questions all the time. So we have a question for you tonight. And essentially the question is from Jamie Starr Crawford. She is a really good friend of ours and has been part and parcel in relationship with us, relationship with my wife. I actually met Jamie when I first met my wife. She was one of the first people that my wife wanted to introduce me to. So Jamie was one of the first people that my wife was using to vet Jason David. So I want you guys to get ready for this. She is part of Triumph. She's integral to Triumph. She's growing in Triumph. She has her own coaching practice, and we're going to bring her on and introduce her and let her ask her questions. It's going to be awesome. All right. Hello, Jamie.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm so excited. I love these discovery moments. I do.
So do I.
I'm just really grateful. I'm so grateful to be here, and thank you always for answering our questions.
I try and do my best. I feel like I've been preparing for a lifetime to answer these questions. So I'm glad you guys have great questions. The better the questions, the thing about the anointing and God's presence on a apostle, prophet, someone that's given to the church. And you'll notice this difference. One of the educational points I give to you guys is there's two different people groups in the body of Christ, in the collective of heaven, in the kingdom of heaven on earth, and it's what the scripture calls the sheep of the Lord, the people of the Lord, the people of God, and then in that group there it says in Ephesians that Jesus gave to the church apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers. So I'm part of the church, but I'm given to the church. And so everyone that has been called to co-shepherd with the Holy Spirit, with Jesus, are a different pocket of the church where they're given to the church to specifically raise up Christ in you, to help you evolve, to help you grow. So answering the questions are essential. The more you guys have questions, the more comes out of me and comes through me. Because sometimes we don't always remember, right? Your kids could ask you a question and you went to school. you did division, you did, but then you don't remember where you put the numbers and all this different stuff. So what happens is when you guys ask, it demands that thing to come forward. And I don't use any notes. That's one thing I want to let the audience know. Every time we get the questions, I use no notes. Everything is just live on the spot. Let's go. So we try to get in alignment with that. So Jamie, why don't you introduce yourself real quick, and then why don't you jump into how this question that you have evolved?
Absolutely. So, but I mean, I'm a follower of Christ. I'm a daughter of God. That's first and foremost who I am.
Absolutely.
And as far as being the many roles that I play in the world as a sister, a daughter, a mother, a friend, I also am a coach and a teacher and a guide for some people, and actually a lot of people. And in that, it's important that I have deep principles that are rooted in truth. Yeah. Knowing that I play the role that I do, I think that it's crucial for anybody in that role to be able to be rooted in principles that are universal of creation and of the creator. And so for me and where I come from, and especially what brought this question forward, is my path to redesigning my relationship with my creator.
Yeah.
And so in my history of religion, and I have to be very distinct when I say religion versus relationship with God, is that I come from a background of 12 years of Catholic school. And 12 years of Catholic school taught me a particular paradigm of how to see God. I was raised by a mother who got me through the church as of the Catholic religion. And so I knew those two things overlapped somewhere. I got the doctrine portion, the guilt portion from the Catholic upbringing, but I also got told how God is love. And I'm so grateful that that is the way that my mom introduced God to me. Okay. And so it kind of offset it. It offset the rigid, inflexible, law-abiding mandate that it felt like as a kid going into church, going into mass, and saying these things that didn't feel like I knew what they meant. I didn't know where they came from. And it feels very fake in a way that I didn't know how to comprehend as a kid. I didn't know how to call it fake or false. To me, it just felt insincere. Now, being able to come from that history, there is still something that I felt true in the Catholic Church and in the Mass, in the religion itself. And so what my upbringing and my questioning brought me into was a pathway that moved away from what we would consider a religious perspective. And it would bring me into a spiritual perspective. What is that exactly? And so
it's interesting. I want to make a question there because I feel you transitioning to what the question is and stuff. But it's like, I know people get this already, but for those that are kind of like, whoa, this is heady. I feel like what you're saying is because Catholicism and all those years that you were in it has such a, look at my hands. It has a this principle, this path, this is the doctrine, this is the teaching, go this way, go this way, go this way. Very rigid, very structured, very formalized, very industrious, very liturgical, right? There's a liturgy. In other words, there are things you must say. There are things you must say, and you must say it this way. And when a child goes through their catechism, they must say it this way and confess this way. And this is salvation. And when you're praying the rosaries, it's, hey, this way. It's very liturgical. It's very framed. Where what we call spiritual, or what people are calling spiritual, is more of is running away from any resemblance of that. Yet they'll, not all, but let's say for one example, they'll buy the tarot cards and they will be literally reading what it says. But because it's not part of a formalized 1,500 year system, it feels organic to them. So now they feel spiritual, right? Is that fair?
That was so my path. That was so my path. And I used to actually express that tarot brought me back to God.
Gotcha.
Because that was the doorway that I had allowed to be what I would consider organic communication.
Gotcha. Yeah. Woo, we could go so deep on this. Gotcha. Well, because what comes up for me is, for instance, in the West, because we were raised with many different things in our generation, TV, video games, VHS, then DVD, now streaming, we're the bridge generation where we understood what it was to still go play outside a lot. And our parents were saying, hey, get out of the house. They were pushing us out the door. And of course, we didn't have a pager on us. We didn't have a phone available when we were outside. We had to know who the closest friend's house was. We had to memorize our address, memorize 3 relatives' phone numbers. You know what I mean? We had all these emergency things programmed by our parents because our parents were raised where they only had 1 or 2 phones in the house in different areas, depending on how big the house was. They were probably raised with 1 TV, 1 massive TV, rather than, 4 TVs or laptops, phones, all these different streaming devices. And so we're like a bridge generation. With that said, we're very romanticized around certain things, and we have higher expectations, I think, about things than any generation ever had in the history of humanity. When it comes to romance, dating, spirituality, experiences, we're very entitled to have goosebumps. We're very entitled to escape. And I think that a lot of, for example, in the West, a prearranged marriage, it seems like the worst thing that can happen to you on the face of the planet. But when you study the statistics around the history around prearranged marriage, the higher percentage of it actually works. It's the stuff that we see at the high in front of the camera surface with royalty and stuff that gets really, really hard and really, really weird because they can't discover each other. People forget that in most civilizations in a prearranged marriage, there's a courting process and they have to get to know each other. And the engagement is a betrothal. So they start to get to know each other as husband and wife, not just as friends. So they get to know each other from a committed perspective. And of course, it's not perfect. Most things aren't. but it just kind of brings that to task for me, right? Because so many people that will go off to be spiritual are casting off any resemblance of a pattern, but then they're in a pattern anyways, and next thing you know, they have to go to Burning Man, they have to go to Coachella, they have to go to the ayahuasca, they have to go and have a mushroom every week. They have, not that that's bad, but I'm saying that there's a dependence on a system. They've created it themselves. But then the question that they're not asking is, what I'm doing and all these people that I found that are my people, how long has this been around where people believe what we believe? And they can go back 4,000 years and find First Nations people that practiced what they are practicing. And so it's like, dude, you're just nothing new under the sun. You're just polarizing yourself to something. But yeah, it just brings that whole thing up for me.
Absolutely. Now that was, I mean, you're describing a pathway that was personal to me. Everything that you spoke about, the way that I would trade one system for another system, that was it.
Okay.
Until the principle of sovereignty entered.
Okay.
That was the first time I was like, what did I just buy into? And what did I give my power over to? And what did I call successful and had to be there? And if you weren't in my circle, then you were somewhere else separated from me and you just didn't know enough. And, you know, all the different ways that separation would cast, like it would cast a shadow over anything that was outside of that. And here I am rejecting religion, starting my own. Yeah.
Yeah. Incredible. So what I know is that we came into this conversation, this question, because of the message on Sunday. We're in the new creation technology. So we're in the power of community transmutation. And I've taught you guys for essentially 9 weeks about all those principles, laid down the groundwork. And now we're in the technology part. So every week we're going to be talking about things in the church that God has given us to transmute and to put on the new creation image. So the first one was communion. And you sent me a message saying, you know, communion, that message on Sunday, the whole thing was just, why don't you share what it was? Said it helped you with the
as I'm listening to
certain things about Roman Catholicism.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it felt, you know, every time I'm listening to one of your teachings and it rubs up against something that was programmed or stuck in a particular old doctrine, even if it's not something that I currently relate to, it's in me somewhere. It's in my past somewhere. Okay. And I call it stuff that I need to clean up. And so there's stuff in me that still needs to clean up my alignment and my congruency towards that would keep me somewhere out of relationship with God. If I've got a rejection in the past that may have either hurt or stung, or I, you know, castrated it or, you know, put it aside around religion, cleaning that up, giving it new distinctions and putting the truth on and having everything else break off, that's been the pathway. And so through the Triumph teachings, being able to hear what you're saying and going like, I don't have a language for that yet. You know, try it on, put it on. Oh, where does that hurt? Oh, that hurts 6th grade. When you looked at when you looked at the priest taking the communion and you saw everybody there and we're like, why does he look like some other God right now? Like this, raising it up. And I'm just like, that looks weird. And why is it like, what is the blood? Why is it turning into wine? Why is it, and then having like my teacher go like, well, he's turning it right now and only the priest can do that. And I was like, well, why? Why can't we do that? Because only the priest can. Yeah. Okay. And so I had questions around that. And it wasn't necessarily that I was the rebel, but I had questions. And so as you're reintroducing communion and what that is from Christ inviting us into that, I could feel within me memories coming to the surface to be cleaned.
Gotcha.
And so I asked you the question of like, was the communion that I experienced in the Catholic Mass. Why was it different than what you're explaining right now?
Yeah.
That's what came up for me. And so I asked you that question, like, help me understand. Why is it that it felt, it's kind of, but it's not?
Yeah, I think that and it was a great question, and I want to say this forthrightly, that the question woke me up to, I used to be prepared in the sense I always was mindful of our Catholic people that coming from Catholic upbringing, Catholic backgrounds when I was younger in my ministry, and somehow along the way, I just wasn't having that in my consciousness. I said, "Oh man, we have to be mindful that I get to be mindful that while I'm teaching, I want to include them also." So literally, I think 2 weeks ago, I included addressing something around Islam. So for people that were raised around Islam, and I quoted something about, Sunnah chapter 9. I literally quoted this hadith a couple months ago, and I said, this is the difference. Look where that leads, and look where this leads. This is what they said about what the Quran says about Jesus, and this is what Jesus says about himself. They're very different. And so it's not for offense. I want people to understand this is not about religion against religion. This is not about religion versus ours is better than yours, That's ridiculous. This is actually about all religion as you see it, formalized, institutionalized. Forget the names. Look at human beings, regardless of where they're born, as the same. Human beings have all the same needs across the board. We all have the same propensities. So therefore, every single language, every single culture has developed, prior to Christ, a systemized idea around how to reach eternity or how to reach heaven. And so what you'll notice is that in every one of them, whether it was through Siddhartha Gautama, who is known as the Buddha, or whether it was through the Vishnus with Krishna, or it was through the Bhagavad Gita, which again comes from the Vedic teachings. It's a progression, Vedic, then Bhagavad Gita, or it's from Taoism or Confucianism or anything. Then you go into tantric teachings, which is a form of Taoism. All of that is religion of people trying to do something. Mayas, Aztecs, First Nations peoples, the Polynesians, Indonesians, Cambodia, some of the biggest temples in the world in Cambodia. They had a whole religious system. It was huge and systematized, and lots of monks. I mean, you have so much. With that said, you see a process in all of it. In Islam, it's prayers, it's what they call jihad, which is literally the war within, and that you are wicked. And since you're wicked, you have to trust in Allah, which goes back to the Middle Eastern moon god. And so that's why you see the crescent moon and the star and everything that they do, because it goes back to a worship of the moon god in that region that got mixed with Judaism and Christianity. So a lot of people don't know these things because they don't research, and they're just looking at the scholastic presentation in Western universities about what religion is. This is who you go to a university and take a religions course, world religions 101, 201, 301, 401, and all you get is this really surface secular viewpoint on those religions. And they don't barely even go into it. And they try to justify how it's not what it is. And so, but all of it is humanity trying. Solomon said this really beautiful thing. He said, everyone has eternity in their hearts. It's written in Ecclesiastes, eternity is written in the hearts of all men. And so, in other words, there is a yearning to connect with eternity because that's the home of our original design. That's the intention of our ecosystem. So there's this code in us that as we're living a sense-based life, that thing keeps saying, that's not what you're about. So that thing, some people obeyed it. Some people actually listened to it and sat and meditated, sat to detach from this world of materialistic illusion. All those things were good promptings. But what it did was, if you notice, in Buddhism, it's I'm going to break the system of attachment. So in New Age, that adapts Buddhism pseudoly, you'll hear, I'm removing attachment. I'm getting free, especially in LA, right? It's like, I'm getting free from attachment. Dude, like, you just got to get free from attachment. Dude, just like write it down and burn it. You know what I mean? Get free. I'm free. I'm in flow. I'm in flow, which is beautiful, but then it gets off put in the nuance because they don't realize where the root is. And so Buddhism is, I'm going to get free from attachment. We have to break free from attachment to become one with the Om. And I'm not teaching Buddhism, but I want to show people, I'm relaying religion. I'm relaying human effort. It's self-effort to self-aggrandizement, to self-justification, to self-liberation, to get close to God. It's the Tower of Babel. Let's get closer to heaven. And astral projection. Let's get closer to heaven. I'm going to learn how to do this, and I'm going to discipline myself, and I'm going to discipline myself, and I'm going to discipline myself so I can go to heaven. And then you tell them, well, space is not heaven. So what are you doing there? What's happening there? Go. That's a shameless plug. Go listen to Should I Astral Project? Discovery Moment. But and there's going to be a part 2 and a part 3 to astral projection. And so in Hinduism, Buddhism is get free from grasping to become one with the Om, with the vibration of the universe, what they believe is the beginning and the source of vibration of the universe. But in order to want to be free from grasping, you have to be free, you have to want. Therefore, in Buddhism, they teach that desire is the root of all evil, desire and attachment. So it's the reason for corruption. So in order to want to be free from desire and attachment, you're already desiring against desire. So you're already physics, quantum physics and quantum physics says that just that force, the inertia of both those forces would keep polarizing and wrap you around yourself over and over and over and over again. It's a time loop. In Hinduism, it's breaking karmic cycles, not just in reincarnation. The West thinks it's just about reincarnation. It's not. It's even about the reincarnation that what you had 5 years ago is now going to repeat itself because the karma is increasing, and then comes reincarnation and stuff. But in Hinduism, it's break reincarnation, so you don't have to keep coming and being born in this world and suffering, so you can get free from that, free from suffering, become enlightened, and then enter into a state of nirvana, which then brings you, when you pass, you can either pass by dying, or you can become a light bulb and go into nirvana or into the realm to become one with Brahman, their God. So people got to realize Hinduism is not devoid of gods. Hinduism has is the biggest polytheistic religion in the world. If you are a true Hindu and truly practicing Hinduism, you would, yes, have your highlight of which gods you tend to focus on, but you would have millions of gods, a pantheon of gods, more than the Greeks had. And so it's kind of like in Catholicism, they'll give you certain saints to pray to for the things that you need. If you lost your keys, pray to this saint. If you're going in an elevator, pray to this saint. If you're going to eat food, if you forgot something, pray to this saint. If something's going on in your marriage, pray to this saint. What they're doing is creating gods. That this is just the same typification of old religious systems where you're creating a mediator. So with that said, we don't see, I'm going to answer this question, but we don't see Catholicism as just like any more evil than any other religion. What it is mankind trying to find answers. But there's a little kicker that sometimes polarizes people when we talk about Catholicism, because there's going to be something that I'm going to say that I hope people don't get polarized on. Please hear my heart. This is just history. This is just truth. This is just facts. Communion, as I taught it on Sunday, is not like the Roman Catholic Mass at all. The teachings of the Catholic Mass, they believe in transubstantiation, which means that the priest, through being in a right being, which means that he's in alignment with the Roman Catholic Church, and he's in alignment with the Pope. By being in alignment with the Pope, who is the vicar of Christ, or the only representation of Christ on the earth, government representation, they can pray a prayer while performing the Mass, and in that Mass, transubstantiation through that prayer transpires, where literally Christ becomes the wafer. And then, so they'll hold it up really high, and they chant and they create all these things. I'm not going to repeat them. I know them, but I'm not going to repeat them. And then they present the cup, the goblet. And in that goblet, they believe that it's actually becoming the blood. And to further that, they believe that only a priest of the Roman Catholic Church can do this. So you can actually Google it and see that it literally says in their teachings in the of the Church, the Second Roman Catechism under Pope John Paul II, said that the reason why Protestants cannot perform is because they renounce the faith of the Catholic Church. They're apostate, which means they're outside the covering of Christ. And so the ministers of the Protestant Church have no authority on earth, so they can't transubstantiate. Now, this is interesting. Some people could be like, oh my God, that's so offensive. But the truth is, oh, good, because I don't want to transubstantiate. That's some weird witchcraft alchemy stuff. So I'm being silly, but this is the difference in what Christ did and what the disciples did and what the early church taught and what now is arrived to today, where we're doing it today. Jesus said, very simply, let's go to what Jesus said. He said, hey, this is my body, which is broken for you. Take and eat. And as we know that, he said, as you eat, you'll eat life unto yourself. And so that has to do with health to your body, which is quoting Isaiah. It's like reverberating Isaiah and Jeremiah and the prophecies of old. And then he says, this is my cup of the new covenant in my blood. And he said, every time you drink, as often as you drink of this, you'll proclaim my death until I come. Here's the thing. The Christ, that moment where Christ did that, what people call the Last Supper. And mind you, the only reason why you and your consciousness, or me, let me ask a question. Do you see it and hear it as the Last Supper still today?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you see that scene, you go, Last Supper.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to do a play on words here to kind of reprogram that in your mind. The only reason why you and I and the consciousness around many people see that scene and say the Last Supper is because the Catholics, the Roman Catholics, called it the Last Supper.
Last Supper.
The original apostles and the initial church never called it the Last Supper.
Right.
So already you have a distinction.
Mm-hmm.
So which means, because why would you call it the Last Supper if the church celebrated that perpetually? It said they went, Book of Acts, house to house daily, breaking bread, which meant that they were teaching the revelation of Christ through this feast. What they called it in the initial church, in the first century church, after Jesus was crucified and resurrected and ascended into glory, what they called it was the love feast. So it was a gathering of people in a big place, and they would eat together, they would cook together, they would make all this food, but in the midst of it, it looked kind of like Passover. So remember what Jesus was doing that night, they were celebrating Passover. Okay, so I'm going to paint a picture. Jesus, what he was doing with his disciples was Passover. It wasn't like Passover. It wasn't copying Passover. It was something that Jews had been doing for thousands of years, since they were told by God to do it through Moses after they escaped from Egypt. So when God delivered them from Egypt, an angel of death, Moses said an angel of death was going to come to Egypt because Pharaoh wouldn't let Israel go and was going to kill all the firstborn of Egypt. And he told them, if you don't let the people of Israel go, God says an angel of death is going to come and take all the firstborn. Pharaoh was like, whatever. I don't care. I'm not letting anybody go. You guys aren't going anywhere. Remember, these are governments. These are kings. These are emperors that he's talking to. This isn't you talking to your mom. This isn't you talking to your dad or your boss. These are emperors he's talking to. This is a prince that grew up in Egypt who was away for 40 years, now is back and saying, yo, I had an encounter with the Creator. The Creator sent me and told me to wield power against you if you don't let the people go. And so he said to Israel, though, the angel of death is coming. Pharaoh has denied to let you go. But the Lord said, take a ewe lamb without spot or blemish, sacrifice it, take the blood, and with hyssop branches, put it on the doorpost and the lintels of the front of your house. And then the angel of death will come, see it, and pass over your homes. So what Jesus was doing was Passover, and it was a feast. He said to them, as often as you do this, you'll do it and proclaim my death until I come. What he was saying was, you'll proclaim that it is done. It's all done. Everything's been provided for you. You just got to put it on. It's all done, 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 done. So when the early church and the apostles were teaching this to people, are you with me, Jamie? Is it cool? Okay. And if you have questions, you raise your hand, jump in, stop me. But what he was doing, what the early church was doing was now, and this is where Christians and church people that are celebrating communion differently today, they're trying to be more authentic. Sometimes they get very Jewish about it. And that's not what they wanted either. Because when the church was practicing these love feasts, there was a little bit of a difference between what they did and what Passover was before Christ died and resurrected and ascended. The difference was the focus in Passover was about their bitterness and their slavery and servitude in Egypt. And so they had to have bitter herbs. They would literally eat bitter herbs on Passover to remind them of their slavery and to remind them of their sin in the wilderness. And the unleavened bread that they ate was to remind them that their forefathers wandered around in the wilderness when they were supposed to go into the promised land. But because they had their bread, their hearts, was leavened with doubt and fear and disobedience, they died in the wilderness and didn't go to the promised land. So even though Passover was about reminding them that they got delivered from death and slavery in Egypt, it was also reminding them of their sin and their guilt. And then they would do this for 4 days, and then they would go and sacrifice the lamb for the atonement sacrifice. So this was all heading up to guilt, right? You're going to sacrifice a lamb for the sins of the nation and the sins of your family for the whole year during this time of atonement. But for days before it, for a month, right now, we're in that season on the Jewish calendar. The Jewish community is thinking about their whole past year, and they're thinking about the mistakes that they've made, and they're eating bitter herbs and they're eating different things to prepare themselves for the head of the year so that God can cleanse them, in a sense, so that they could start afresh. But mind you, they don't have any temples anymore. There's no sacrificial system. They do not have any of that anymore. They're not doing it. It's almost as if literally Jesus said, tear down this temple and I'll rebuild it in 3 days, which he was talking about himself. So when the church celebrated a love feast, they still had the wine, right? They still had the grape juice, and they still had the bread from Passover, but they didn't have the bitter herbs. The rest was just a bunch of food. It was time to eat. And that's the difference, because the early church, it came from the Passover idea, but this is what's really cool. For all of humanity until Christ, the picture that Israel was archetypally or archetype prophetically fulfilling was they were mindful of their sin until the future. So until a certain arc point, they knew someone was coming to pay the price for them. They knew that a redeemer was coming to pay the price for all humanity.
Mm-hmm.
So Passover celebration was unto the future. They were looking forward when all man would be able to pass over and be free, would get free from death, right? But they weren't yet free. So it was just moving it forward like a credit card, moving it forward, moving it forward, moving it forward. The church does not celebrate Passover the way they did. What we're doing is reminding now it is done. So now when we drink the wine or the grape juice and we eat the bread, the body of Christ, we're proclaiming it is done. It is done. It is done. Just put it on. Just take off the old man, put on the new man. Take off the old man, put on the new man. All right. When the Roman Catholic Church does it, they're literally, in a sense, transubstantiation, they're sacrificing Christ again every Sunday or every Mass. So a faithful Catholic will go, like in South America or Mexico or Italy or different parts of the world, they might go to Mass every single morning, which means that the system of Mass is like, hey, it's not done. Come and get right and take this thing, take it on so that you could, get free from your guilty conscience, so that you can be free of your guilt. And they will go into confession. They'll confess their sin to the priest. Then the priest will tell them what to do, how many rosaries to pray, how many Hail Marys. He'll tell them if they need to light a certain amount of candles. He'll tell them if they need to do penance. And he'll tell them to then go take Mass. And then they'll go to the front and they'll take the Eucharist, because they believe that Christ literally is coming down when that priest prays that and is becoming that. This is where it gets a little, please don't be offended, people, is the Mass of the Catholic Church is actually Egyptology. So it is a Romanized, Greco-Roman merger with Egypt, because remember, Alexander the Great loved Egypt. So Greco-Roman religion, paganism, and Egyptology, where the priests of Osiris, of Isis, Horus, and Set, and of Ra would pray. They would make this cake that was a circle, and you can research this. Archaeologists have found these Osiris cakes preserved with all the symbology on top of the cake, and they believe that they were pulling down Osiris. It represented that Osiris was regrown and reborn, and that they would pull him down, transubstantiation, literally, same exact thing, not like it, same exact. They would pull down Osiris, he would become that cake, and people would eat it in order for fertility, in order to remove guilt and curses and bad energy around why the land wasn't growing, around why their family was messed up, or all these different things that people struggle with and are looking for solutions for today. What happened was, actually, let me stop. I think that's heavy, and so what do you think about that? How does that land for you?
I'm learning. Like I'm having to actually like remove certain things and implant certain things, and remove certain things and implant certain things. So that's mostly like in the process of receiving what you're saying to me. I'm like, that goes here and this goes here and this goes here. Like, and so actually, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Go ahead.
I don't have a level of offense in me hearing this. In fact, I think it's a little bit clarifying, because I had previous understandings of Egyptology, and I had studied certain rituals in different occults and, Wicca and all these different traditions that would have sacrificial like similarities, or in this case, that particular transubstantiation model.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, it's actually placing what I've learned in the past into what I'm learning in this moment and going, interesting. And when did that happen? And so what you're talking about as far as the Alexandrian pull, where he pulled influence and culture, and what would happen in that moment to every generation that would follow in that Roman tradition. Like, where would that end, and where would that influence and the Roman birth of Rome itself and the Catholic staple and the center, and where it would actually make its home in Italy, like
because
just like seeing like those parts.
In the journey of Rome, because people got to remember, Rome, sometimes people forget, Rome is Italy and Italy is Rome. So the Roman Empire was centered in Italy. That's what Rome and Italy is. All roads lead to Rome was Rome, Italy, Italians, Sicilians, Napoli, building roads all over the world in order so that merchants would literally could follow any road and it would lead to Rome. And so, but they have to remember that the predecessor of Rome is Alexander, we know as Alexander the Great. Alexander was from Macedonia, so Macedonia, Greece, but he conquered that whole area. But he went out into the realms of like India and things, and that's when he finally got his butt beat because he thought he was so great. But when all these empires came with regalia and armor and new Thai kickboxing and new Indian martial arts, and Asia is a whole nother animal compared to. Asia's been ahead of the West for most of humanity's existence. That's just facts. With that said, it's because most of what we know as the advancements of Asia came from the area of the Middle East and Persia, Turkmenistan, Pakistan, India, that area, North Africa. That was the center of the world, and it shifted. Why? That was Turkey, Mount Ararat. That was the birthplace of the reintroduction of humanity to Earth, and then where you had human government begin to take form with Babylon and the early Chaldeans 5,000 years ago. And then you had a group of people that splintered off of that. They didn't want to have anything to do what they were doing. They were like cousins of it all. And they began to migrate into what was known as Russia, which is part of Asia, and India. And they moved eastward. And then that's the where the Asian world comes from. And so, he then went back and retreated back to Alexandria, which is in Egypt. That he made Alexandria his headquarters rather than Macedonia. So let's skip forward. When Rome begins to get established as now the empire, remember, Alexander's empire split into 4 empires. And so one of those empires was the battle of what became Rome, and how it conquested then the other 3 empires and then expanded. And so Rome got centered. Rome is, hey, we used to be disciples and brotherhood to Alexander, and now we've been fighting this fight to reunite that empire, and it got centered in Rome. So what's his name? Nero, Emperor Nero, the Emperor of Rome. He couldn't stand what was happening with the early church, performing miracles, undermining his godhead, because Alexander was supposed to be a god. So then all of the other Roman emperors said that they were gods, that they were deities. And so when an emperor can't stop a son of God from performing miracles, and they try to boil disciples in oil and they don't die, and they put a bunch of lions and bears in an arena, and none of the animals run out, they're starving, to attack a disciple or an apostle, and they stop and lay down and become docile. without anything happening. And then the Colosseum of Rome begins to witness these beings standing in the Colosseum, stopping the lions and causing them to be calm. And this is basically an affront to Nero. So Nero essentially started burning and persecuting and killing Christians everywhere, and he literally set Rome on fire in order to blame it on the followers of Christ, to turn the popular opinion of Rome against the early church, so that he wouldn't have to just have soldiers killing Christians. He could have normal people outing other people. Does that sound like government, what's been happening since 2020? Yes, it does. This is media shifting opinion and twisting things. And this is ancient protocol. And so what happens is it just created so many problems. What people get to understand in this picture is that Constantine arose as an emperor some years after Nero. And it was so ridiculous what Nero did. Constantine's mother was a pagan witch. She worshipped the god of Rome. She worshipped Zeus. She worshipped Diana. She was, there's a lot of people, you'll see them on Instagram today, this is not new, who they'll start putting moons, women that'll put moons on their head or get a tattoo on their chest. This goes back all the way to Persia, of priestesses in the order of the goddess of the moon, which has had many names. Diana, the ancient name is Semiramis, that's the initial name. Semiramis, Diana, one that starts with an M. But anyways, that is the god of the moon. So you'll notice what happened is he had a conversation with his mother, and she said, just create a religion with the face of what they believe. And so he had soldiers as spies invading and infiltrating the church, getting to know things about what they taught. And then he took the symbols, Jesus, he said, oh, well, that's kind of like Zeus being born as a man. That's kind of like Ra, the Egypt god, Ra, being born of a woman, which went back to Babylonian faith. Check this out, where the ancient, you'll see in Catholic Church, Mary, the mother, holding Jesus, the baby, right? This is a very popular statue in Roman Catholicism. But that setup is the same as ancient, where Semiramis, the goddess of the moon, had a baby who was the incarnation of the sun god. Okay. This is exactly the same religion with a different facelift, with a Jewish Christ informed, like a Christ pictures with Mary and all this stuff. So then what transpires is it gets really kind of, the nuances can get really shady, and it gets like in a gray area because the early church never built basilicas. The apostles never had any plans of building basilicas and buildings, and everything was in homes or in businesses or in things like that, marketplaces, storefronts. That's how it was. And then there were a lot of people that maybe they had a lot of money, and they had big homes, and they would build like a community center, a place of gathering with open air, some tent coverings and stuff. And so that was very normal for the initial believers. So what happened was Constantine created a religion called Catholicism, and he put all Roman, Greco-Roman Egyptology that they did, what their belief system was, and put Christian Jewish faces on it, and then created a government religion and said that Christianity was the religion of the nation in order to get the underground church, the true believers, out of hiding and maybe win them over into this church so that they wouldn't feel outside of the mainstream anymore. This is exactly what the Chinese Communist government did after they killed a bunch of Christians between 1920 and 1950 and burned all the Bibles and all types of books in China. 10 years later, they started what's called the Three Self Church that has government-created doctrines, government-created things based on pseudo-psychology and pseudo-spirituality, pulling from the Gospels, pulling from Christianity. They had their own people study Christianity. They pulled from universities in the West, from world religion information, and created the Three Self Church, which is way off from the initial doctrines and teachings and revelations of Christ and the original disciples and what you see as the New Testament letters, the apostolic letters. So you can go to a Three Self Church and you can go study their doctrines and you'll see it is so removed from what is, because they wanted Christians that maybe were younger or less mature in the teachings to feel, oh, we don't have to be scared anymore. We'll just join the Three Self Church. But then in the Three Self Church, they watch them. They watch what they think, what they believe. If someone gets a revelation and starts informing people, they will take that person, set them aside, and sometimes they'll never be seen again. They'll be sent to a re-education camp and maybe never, ever return. Lots of books out there about that, lots of even YouTubes about that now. But this is an old mechanism. So go look at pictures of a Catholic Mass. You're looking at an ancient Egyptology protocol. Even some of the garments that they wear and the peaked hood hats, you can go find hats like that. They're like the Pharaoh, some of the Pharaoh hats in Egypt, and some of the hoods and hats that the Egyptian priests wore. The crooked staff, the bent staff with the slumping Christ on it that some of them hold, is actually a warlock rod going back to Persian, Babylonian, Egyptian witchcraft. It is believed that that rod was very similar to what the Janus and Jambres, the Egyptian witches, the warlocks, that competed with Moses. When Moses threw his rod down and it became a serpent, and it said that Janus and Jambres threw their rods down and it became serpents. And what happened was Moses' rod, his serpent, ate their serpents. But it's interesting how the Bible says it. It says they threw down their rods and became serpents. But it doesn't say Moses' serpent ate their serpents. It says Moses' rod ate theirs, which means his authority, God's authority, was greater than a pseudo spirituality. And so the Mass is an Egyptology. That's why even on many of the wafers that the priest holds up, the big one, it says I-H-S on it, which is a denotation marker to ancient Egyptology. Ancient Egyptology used to have a cake that said I-H-S on it. And I-H-S was Isis, Horus, and Set. So if you ask a priest what that means, they'll tend to say it means in his service. But who is his service? So when you go and research the depths, did this exist before? Oh yeah, it's originated in Babylon. So let me give you the further backdrop, and then I'll end with the answer. Is that how this started was in Babylon. These people didn't understand, Babylon is like the first major human metropolitan government empire. And so Nimrod was the beginning. He was that leader that created that and united all those lands of Canaan, Cush, the Hittites, all that stuff that happened. And he was wicked. He was very wicked. His mother was a priestess in the orders of those ancient religions that were being birthed. Now, you would have to ask, where did people get all this stuff? Where did the ideas of Tara, where did the ideas of casting bone lots down, and tea leaf reading? And where did this all goes back to an ancient center where fallen entities and fallen angelic beings were revealing and partnering to reveal secrets to man so that they could corrupt man and take their energy and because they don't have room to get into this world unless it's through us. So what happened is, if you participate, then they have authority and they begin to use and abuse you. So I've had believers, we try to help people grow in the Lord. And we say, I've had people ask me, should, as a believer, let's say I'm at a funeral in my family, and they're Catholic, and there's a mass because the person that died was Catholic. Is it like communion? Should I take the mass? It's the same thing. I say, absolutely not. Do not do it. It's not about fear. It's about covenant. And that's what people need to remember about Christ. Israel is the wife of Yahweh. The whole world, every human being outside of that Israeli Jewish covenant of marriage with God, is the bride of Christ. So we're going to be married to Christ when he returns. There's going to be a big wedding, universal, intergalactic wedding. And so what happens is, it's like saying, hey, I'm engaged to my wife. And then some other woman wanted me to lay in her lap and feed me and me to sleep in her bed. And so that would break covenant with my fiance, right? So that I'm not going to get married. It's not going to happen. So what happens is that practice is a whole nother spiritual realm that's informed by ancient fallen demonic information. And so what happens is, that's why they have to do those rituals and those liturgies just like that, because it's old coded language, consciousness, ideas that's been perpetuated that substantiates drawing on that energetic spiritual power and then releasing that to people. And so what people are doing is they find themselves feeling guilty often. Then they find themselves, I've known many Catholics that battle deeply with suicide. And no matter how much they go do mass more, they go do rosary more, they go do these things, and it just perpetuates. Why? Because they keep getting into bondage. Why does the Catholic Church have exorcists where they exorcise their own people on a consistent basis? It goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. But just to say, I tell people, don't partake of the Catholic Mass, because it is not the communion, the supper, the wedding feast of Jesus. It is not the love feast that Jesus told us, you'll proclaim my death until you come. It is not a celebration of it's done. It's a come and do it today and do it again and do it again and do it again and do it again. I know we had talked about this earlier. I said it instead of it being all done, it's keep doing it because you're not right. Makes sense.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
So much.
And there's just freedom. You don't. Yeah.
A lot.
Are you?
It's a lot.
Yeah.
A lot, but it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, because I could see it looks like it's going through all the things that you studied and all the things that you were schooled in.
I'm just like, whoa.
Yeah, go ahead. It's okay. Express
It's a lot.
Yeah.
And it's and when I say it makes sense. I don't mean that in the argument appeal to reason. I mean, like, it makes sense in my spirit. Everything you're saying feels like familiar.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. Absolutely.
I don't know with the reception here.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. Absolutely. Are you there?
Yeah. That's my experience here. And therefore they feel like as though information, this is how best I can explain it. Something's being returned to me. That's what it feels like. I don't know why it feels.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you're getting free from concepts that bind you. You know, just because you don't think there's a snake in your bedroom doesn't mean that there's not a snake in your bedroom, right? There could be a snake in your bedroom and you just don't know. So some people think that ignorance means that you won't be affected by the realm that you're ignorant of. And we sometimes God protects us, and there's a grace on us that is protecting us until he can unveil that ignorance and reveal something to us. But then other times he might allow that ignorance, we experience a suffering, so that when the awareness comes of the truth, we go, wow, that's why I suffered. Scripture says that even Jesus, in Hebrews, it says that Jesus learned obedience through the things that he suffered, because you suffer and then you learn, you know how it works, you know how this realm works. Suffering doesn't mean harm; it just means pain. Don't do that this way, do it that way. Don't sow the seed that way, sow it this way. I sowed the seed this way and I didn't get any fruit, but I sowed it this way and I got fruit. Oh, I know how things work now. I suffered from not getting returns over here, but now I'm not suffering because I learned obedience. Obedience doesn't mean just do it, listen to me, no matter what I say, do it. That phrase just means we learn how to stay in alignment. We learn how to come into alignment with the best and the way God intended things to work. And then it works for us. So we suffered because we didn't know, but then we learn alignment, obedience, stay in alignment with this way. This is the way. This is the highest way. This is the good way. This is the great path. This is the path of blessing. And so, that's why, there's so much here. There's so much here. But there is, I thank you for the question, because there was something that you said, and it was like, yeah, it's like, you kind of put quotations. It's like you're going to the mass and it's like, yeah, don't you know that Jesus died for you? You should be in love with God. Come and take this mass. Yeah. I know you said something like that. I don't know if you remember. Yeah. Oh, I can't hear you. Hello? It's all right. Well, listen. Hey, Jamie, thank you for your question. If we need to pick this up another time, we will. But I really appreciate you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for opening up this discussion for people that needed to most likely really hear this information and just get free from anything implicated on them through that system. And, some were, well, it didn't start well-meaning. It started from a force of corruption and let's kind of a smoke screen. Of course, it was self-interest. They wanted all Rome to be in agreement. They wanted all Rome to be at peace. He wanted to be in control of everyone's belief systems and have a certain context. And Christianity was, they would say to each other in Rome, hey, happy Tuesday, Caesar is God. And the other Roman would respond, God is Caesar. So one of the problems that they had was they would greet a follower of Jesus and they'd say, happy Tuesday, Caesar is God. And he would say, no, Jesus is Lord. And so immediately there was just shaking in Rome. So part of it is a smoke screen. Part of it is deception. Part of it is he thinks, hey, this is the way I keep Rome together. But no matter what, they deceived people. And that's the way it was birthed. There was arguments about Mass for 500 years before they completely said that it was the dogma of the Roman Catholic Church, transubstantiation in itself, because it wasn't practiced in the beginning. When they realized that the early Christians were doing the love feast, they were trying to figure out how to do that in a Roman way, in harmony. And so somebody had pulled on the religions and the things of Egypt and all that stuff and said, no, this isn't his mother told him, this isn't our practice. We do it in private as priestesses. It's in private, usually with orgies, usually with this, that, and the other. And so for fertility, for nature growing, all this stuff. And he said, you just have to do this, have a priest, create a caste of priests, all this stuff. And they did. Jesus never had, the disciples never created priests that stood above and separate from the rest. He just had apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers to serve the whole community from within the context of the community, not from over there in a monastery. So very, very different. And so I think people can get really free from this, through this question and through this information, and hopefully just trust Christ, know that he did it all for you, and the celebration of communion is you perpetually saying, it is done, it is done, it is done, it is done. So even this week, every day, like I said on Sunday, every day I've had the wine and the bread and celebrated that it was done. The bread being the health to my body. By his stripes I am healed. The chastisement of my peace was upon him. I'm not being healed, I am healed. I was healed by him on the cross, death, burial, and resurrection. And then the blood, this is the new covenant reality. I'm in grace, I receive grace, I receive mercy, I receive forgiveness of sins. He blotted out our iniquities, separates transgressions out of alignmentness, the record of our wrongdoing, as far as away from me, as far as the east is from the west. I celebrate that I'm the righteousness of God in Christ. My family is now the righteousness of God in Christ. I'm drinking this on the behalf of the whole body of Christ and myself. Boom, you drink it and you just feel so much, you're just free, because all of the lies are just shut down. They're just shut down. And after that, I don't have to go do anything. I don't have to go make I don't have to do a rosary. I don't have to have this guilt on my life. I don't have to self-flagellate. I'm missing the word, but I don't have to do that stuff because we are free. Of course, there's logical things, like if I need to talk to someone about something that I offended them on, that's logical, but that's not based on guilt. That's based on freedom. Hey, I'm so free. I don't know why I was afraid to talk to you, but I want to talk to you about this thing. Can we talk? Let's reconcile, because I love you. And so that's what that does for you. Now it's not guilt. Now it's not, I don't want to go to hell, or I don't want to go to purgatory, so I'm doing this in fear. It's, I am free. I am now enlisted in heavenly realities. I am now a citizen of heaven, and I'm celebrating that for myself and the whole body of Christ globally. Yeah. So that's it. Thank you, Jamie. Bless you. I'm going to let you go. We'll see you this week, and stay tuned for more discovery moments. God bless.